My pleasure to introduce former captain of the Terriers, Glenn Constable.
I have a New York accent, not a Boston accent, so bear with me. And I have nothing to sell. So, but you can tweet me on GC Talks, at GC Talks on Twitter. I first want to thank Coach Jones, because that is a good guy right there. And I want to talk about Steve Wright as a basketball player, and I want to talk about Steve Wright as a person. But first I want to talk about being a good person. You guys, I want to talk to you guys, and I want to talk to the Wright family as well. Specifically, this is a good guy right here. And when you have a good person as your coach, you can go a long way. By the way, you forgot to mention that Maryland game. I was the color analyst on that game. and by the way, I had to do everything I could not to show that it was one-sided in that game. That was brutal. That was brutal. You did listen to the game? Yeah, I was struggling. Guys were making shots. I'm going, that's a good shot. I got the producer right here going, stop. It's interesting. There's an old Native American proverb. It goes like this: tell me something, tell me a fact, and I will believe. Tell me something that is the truth, and I will follow. Tell me a story, and it remains in my heart forever. Steve Wright is not a story, but there's so many stories that he has remained in all of our hearts forever. And I had the privilege, and I love talking to young men like you guys, because it's so important that you realize the friendships that you're making. Steve Wright was not a good basketball player. He was a great basketball player. He was 6'9". He was ahead of his time. And he also had a knee injury. You'll see a lot of these pictures up here. Sometimes you see him with a big bandage on his knee. Back when we played, you guys play now, you get an ACL, you're back out in a month. I'm in the NBA, so I see it. If he didn't hurt his knee, he probably would have been a 10-year pro. No maybes. And I'm in the NBA. That's how good he was. 6'9", could shoot, could handle, could pass, did everything on the court. He was a great, great basketball player. But what I want you guys to understand is what a good friend he was and a good person he was. The relationships that you make right now are lifetime. Lifetime. Steve always had my back as a player. I always had his back as a player. We started 4 years together. I like this little point guard, by the way. I like you, man, because that guy's got everyone's back. He does. But there are players that are special, and Steve was special. There were friendships that we made that were special. I can't tell you how happy I am to see Desmond. Steve was my roommate and teammate. Desmond was my roommate. Doug Beans here was my roommate. Howie and Bruce, who weren't basketball players, but they were my roommate. Howie was a great soccer player. We had the best times as friends. Me and Des, me and Doug, what you guys are doing now, put basketball aside. I could talk basketball. I talk basketball for a living. You want to talk X's and O's? I know why you guys won that game. The press disrupted them. And they got complacent. That's why you guys won. But it's important for me to talk a little bit about Steve, not just as a basketball player. I was at the game when he dropped 42 on UConn. And it wasn't the UConn team that Northeastern just beat. It was a really good team. New England was different back then. We played UConn, we played Maryland at Maryland when they had Buck Williams and Ernest Graham and Albert King, and Steve lit them up like a Christmas tree. And it was like he lit everyone else up. But I want to talk about him as a person because I also had the privilege after school. I moved from New York. Steve and I went overseas and played, not in the same team, but together. Came back. I moved back to DC. Met my lovely wife, and we were looking for a place to live. And Julie and Steve opened their house for us, and we lived there with our 5-month-old Cocker Spaniel that was not trained. And then, I'm going to do it, Julie. And every time this Barney was the dog's name, every time Barney saw Julie, it would pee on the floor. They had a new house. The kids weren't born yet. It was a new house. The carpet was white. We come in, it was a disaster. But this Steve Wright, his person, his character was so unique. The relationships that you guys make with each other right now, this was a great win. You'll forget this win, but you're going to remember the friendships that you had. That is the most important thing that you guys have, is each other. Desmond calls me all the time. We talk all the time about nothing. And I'm 58 years old. And the things we talk about I can't repeat, but it's like we were back in college. Not much different than what you guys talk about. Now, even. I'm embarrassed to say. Steve's personality and character was unparalleled to anything. He was the most thoughtful, quiet, humble. He had the innate ability to connect people and make you comfortable. And one thing I've noticed about you guys is you guys also have those traits. Steve had that. He was a leader, but could make you comfortable and connect people. And that is something, especially after this election, I think that we're all searching for. He had that kind of personality. I had the privilege to also remain best friends with Steve after college. Took a while to get back on Julie's good graces after the dog thing, and we moved out. But Steve was the type of guy that never got rattled with anything. I saw Steve mad twice. Once was when he dropped 42. It was hilarious because Steve was so humble, and Doug knew him, and Desmond knew him, and Doug Bean knew him, and Howie and Bruce, and he wasn't. Him and I had completely different personalities coming to college. I came as an 18-year-old kid from Queens, New York, and Doug Bean was trying to teach me what to do at Boston University, and Steve and I became best friends immediately. Steve Wright was 6'9". Coach Thomas will tell you, probably weighed, as freshmen, we were both freshmen at the same time, probably weighed 6'9", buck, what, 80? Des?
167.
167? I was 6'2", like 140. So I remember this, and Steve was as gentle and thoughtful of a guy that you'll ever meet. But he would kick your butt on the court. We go down to the bookstore to get our books. First week of school. Maybe it was the first day of school. I don't want to say first week to mess you guys up. So we go down. There's a huge line. I'm coming from Queens. I have a little Queens in me, but I've matured since then. We're standing in line. It's a huge line. It must have been about, 100 kids waiting in line. And Steve's 6'9", 150 pounds, I'm 6'2", 130 pounds. And there's you probably still have these guys here. He was either from Potomac, Maryland, or Long Island. Okay? You know where I'm going with this, sports fans. Is this thing live? So he turns around, he's with about 4 or 5 guys and girls that they were all, and Steve and I were practicing together, we knew each other. We didn't know a lot of other people, we're waiting for our books. And this guy turns around, looks at Steve and goes, hey, come here, look at this guy. And he starts to, stand next to him, and Steve's smiling at him and nothing, and I'm just looking at Steve going, when's he gonna do something, And the guy's going, he's calling over friends. I don't even know, it was like a freshman book thing. I don't know how this guy knew so many people. But me and Steve were standing there, and he's, making these comments about how tall Steve was and how thin he was, and Steve's got a big smile on his face, and I lost it a little bit. I said something to the guy I probably shouldn't have said, and backed him off a little bit, and got in front of Steve, and pushed him a little bit, and nothing happened, but the guy backed off, and I said to Steve, I said, don't take that shit from him. Don't ever do that. Don't take that shit from him. He was so composed, was unflawed. Didn't matter to him. Mattered to me more, right? Junior year, we're in practice. Des, I don't know if you remember this. There was a little guard from the Bronx that was on our team. He was a physical kid. He was tough, and we're practicing. And Patino was killing us. I promised Joe Jones I wouldn't tell Patino stories, and I think I promised Mike Jarvis that because I could be here all night. And I won't tell Patino stories, but he was killing us in a practice. And I don't know what happened. I think I came off a screen, and is that partition still come out? It still comes out? All right, so the thing was closed. The girls were practicing on one side. We were practicing on another. So it was tight, right? So I come off a screen, and I don't know what happened. I went up for a shot, and I don't know what happened, but I think Steve set the screen for me. The kid undercut me. I went flying into the wall, and I didn't know what happened. I hit my head on the wall, hit my head on the floor, got up, it was like a cartoon, got up, right? Get up, and I don't know what's going on. And Patino's yelling at everybody, and, it was like a bad dream. And I get up and go, and Steve comes over to me. I'm laying on the floor. Steve comes over and goes, I wouldn't take that shit. So I get up and I'm in a fist fight with this guy for about 10 minutes. Patino wouldn't stop it because he loved to see it, And I'm looking around, I'm holding this guy in a headlock, and Steve's over there smiling in the background. He had the best sense of humor. He really did. And as time went on in our relationship, which I've been so blessed to have, to see him marry Julie and be a father to Kevin and Sean was just incredible. You guys were incredibly blessed, and I think it's important for the Wright family and everyone here to know how special Steve was to the Boston University community. Because you guys only knew me after, right? This is me now at BU, back playing with Steve. The other time I saw him mad was Steve and I were roommates in a little dorm room, and we were rooming, our suite mates were Howie and Bruce. And both of those guys used to like to get under his skin, which was literally impossible to do because he was so calm. He had the calmest demeanor. He really did. I mean, you couldn't rattle him on the court, you couldn't rattle him after the court, but and they would do anything they could to rattle Steve. Well, we were in Sleeper Hall. What floor was it? 7? No, 11. We were on 11th floor. Our rooms were connected. It was like a hotel thing where there was a door, partition door in the middle. There was a little crack next to the door that separated the rooms. Steve had a plant, which that was the other thing. Who has plants? He would water the plant. I didn't know, He would tell me to water it, and I wouldn't water it. So he had a what do you call those things? A spritz. That he spritzed the plant, and he had 2 of them. One of them, he was into that. One of them got the whole plant. The other one was like more of a stream, right? So we would have these like immature, sophomoric, what you guys do, bizarre like fights with our roommates, Howie and Bruce. So there was a little crack in the door, and I would always instigate things too. So Steve took the spritzer, which now had a stream, and was squirting them through this little hole and got the whole room wet and got them wet, right? Hopefully they would surrender, but they didn't. Howard came up with the idea of, all of a sudden, so we're going back and forth, and they're throwing stuff, and the door's shut, and they can't retaliate because Steve had this little plant thing. All of a sudden, an envelope gets slipped under the door that was dividing the rooms. White envelope. So I go, Steve, what is that? He goes, let me see. He goes down, and all of a sudden, shaving cream pops out of the envelope. Howie stepped on it from the other side. It came up and hit Steve. That was the second time I've ever seen him get mad. Went all over the place. And then it was an all-out war. But Steve Wright's character is really what I want to talk about. His character, you see his name and number up on the ceiling. You see his banner. You see his records. You know what he's done. There was no better person. He was a saint. There was no better person. There was no one I was more comfortable with. There was no one I connected more with, aside from my wife, than Steve Wright. No one. And I remember things, and this is really weird. And Doug Bean, I think you'll remember this, and Coach T, I think you will too. Des, I don't think you were there then. My first game was an exhibition game. You guys know you guys are players. You know, sometimes you connect with guys on the court. You just, this guy connects with everybody. The red hair. What's his name? Kyle Foreman. All right. I like his game. I told you that. Okay. Sometimes you connect with guys. The first game I played with Steve Wright, we played. It was an exhibition game. Athletes in Action. Coach T, you remember that? You remember that? It was at Case. Doug, remember? And all I know is I was bringing the ball down, and these guys were pros. They were pro players. Are they still around? Athletes in Action? Yeah, Athletes in Action. They were like former NBA guys, that weren't playing anymore. They were NBA guys, big guys, 7-footers. And I'm playing my first game with Steve Wright, and I'm hitting them for backdoor plays that like 5 in a row. And I'm going, man, we got a good thing going on here. And we stayed 4 years together with those backdoor plays. So value the guys that you connect with. But the fact that we connected off the court was so much more important and so valuable to me as a person. Steve's character, this is about Steve Wright here. This whole thing is about Steve Wright. And his character is what made him. You could be a great basketball player, but if you have no character, if you don't have your teammates' backs, if you don't think that a friendship with a teammate is not important, if you don't think being a good father is not important, if you don't thank your parents every day for making sure you got here, if you don't thank Coach Jones, I'd like to see you guys, after a practice, go over to Coach Jones and thank him. Those are the things that Steve Wright taught you as a person. That's the character that he had. He was an amazing father. He was an amazing husband. He was an amazing friend. And he always had everyone's back in his own humble way. So if you guys could emulate that, that would be just a wonderful thing. I'd like to bring up Julie. Julie, come on up. Yes?
Yeah, come on.
Come on up, Julie. We're all trying to figure out, by the way. This is Steve's. This is Steve's.
You're not sure how important.
Honest to God, that is Steve's. He was 6'9½". So I just want to honor you too, because this is here to honor Steve, and you know how much we love you. So let's give it up to Steve. P.S. Julie went to BC. You can boo. You can boo. Thank you.
Great job, Glenn.
As you can certainly tell by now, we have a lot of great storytellers in the room. And we could go on telling stories all night, but we have to wrap up the program. These guys have a game to play.